All right, by now we all know the story of the legendary Cobra, but do you know the name of the man who actually designed this car? And don't say Carroll Shelby. Hi there, Rick DeBrule with another chapter in the automotive evolution. I'm here once again at the Martin Auto Museum in Phoenix. You know, this is a great collection. We have more than 180 cars. And while there are an awful lot of amazing automobiles here, few shapes get the kind of immediate, awe-inspired reaction that this Cobra creates. And this is a real Cobra, but it's what we're going to call a continuation car. The first generation Cobras were built in the 1960s. This generation, the cars we call the CSX 4000 series, started in the 90s. Designed, developed, and assembled by Shelby American, this is a true Cobra. But while it has the original shape, over time, a lot of the components have evolved to make this car both better and safer than the original. But before I talk about the history of the Cobra, I need to take a moment to ask you to like and subscribe. And in the comments down below, let me know what I got right, and of course, what I got wrong. There's always something I got wrong. And let me know if you think this is the greatest all-time American sports car. And if not, well, I want you to tell me why. All right, let's get back to the roots of the Shelby Cobra. It starts with a company called AC Cars in England. Now, the first vehicle built under that name was back in 1904. It was a three-wheeler called the Auto Carrier. Get it? AC? Built for, well, carrying things. Over time, they made bigger and better four-wheeled vehicles. In 1953, well, they moved into the world of the two-seater sports cars with a car called the AC Ace. It was a solid car that, in fact, won its class at Le Mans in 1959. And it's the car that Carroll Shelby decided would be a great foundation for his new V8 powered racer. You know, the idea was simple. Take a lightweight British sports car and put a much more powerful American V8 engine up front. And boy, just about that quickly, a legend was born. And of course, Carroll Shelby's history, well, it's well known. As he used to call himself a one-time chicken farmer, he was a guy who, after a stint as a pilot in the Air Force, discovered he was really good at racing. Good enough that he co-drove an Aston Martin to victory at Le Mans in 1959. And yep, that's the same year that AC Ace won its class. And while Carroll Shelby was a darn good driver, he was an even better salesman. He sold Ford on the idea of supplying him engines to put into that lightweight British sports car. And then he sold car buyers on the idea that driving one of his Cobras was the next best thing to winning at Le Mans. His first Cobras had 260 cubic inch engines, but that quickly changed to the 289. And while those cars sold well and they won races, Shelby wanted something even more spectacular. So they redesigned the chassis and the body to fit Ford's new 427 cubic inch engine. And the result? Well, it was magic. The 427 Cobra won its debut race at Brands Hatch in 1966. And while the car is a legend today, fewer than 350 were actually built between 1965 and 1967. Which brings us to this car right here. Now, as I mentioned, Shelby American built its last 427 Cobra in 1967. But in the years after that, plenty of companies popped up building replicas. Some were actually pretty nice. Others, they were just cheesy ripoffs. So in the mid-90s, Carroll Shelby decided it was time to get back into the game by creating a continuation Cobra. Now, the original Cobras had serial numbers that started with either a 2000 or a 3000. In '96, Shelby started the continuation series. These are what we call the CSX 4000 cars. Initially, they were almost identical to that original 427 Cobra. But as time went on, they evolved with better brakes, better chassis. Shelby outsourced the building of those components, but they assembled them all as a roller chassis, a car that was sold without an engine or a transmission, so the buyer could create whatever he wanted. But before we go any further, let's take a moment to talk about the two guys who made this all possible. You see, back in England, there was a fellow named John Tejero. He designed the chassis for the AC Ace. And while he did not have an engineering degree, he was pretty good at building race cars, and over the years designed a number of very successful racers in England. And the guy responsible for this spectacular shape, the shape that has become an automotive icon, was named Eric George Gray. And to be honest, I really don't know much about him, and I wish I knew more. But back in about 1951 or so, he's the man who laid out the design for a shape that has captivated the automotive world for decades. And while I can't tell you his story, I want to make sure that you remember his name, Eric George Gray. And if anyone out there knows more about this guy, well, please put the information in the comments down below. All right, let's walk around and take a look at the styling of the beautiful shape of our CSX 4000 series Cobra that we have here at the museum. And the great thing about the Martin Museum is, in addition to this car, right beside it, we have an AC Ace as well. This is a 1959, the third generation of the Ace. It had evolved over time. And this one's been heavily modified, but we get the basic idea. I mean, there's some differences between what we see in this car and what we see in that Cobra next to it. Of course, to start with, it's got this AC logo on the front, but you'll also notice that the grille area is more upright compared to that car right there. And the most significant difference between the AC Aces and the Cobras is what we'll call this mustache right there. The drooping mustache, I believe, is the Ace people call it. And you'll notice that we don't have that same element right here. You'll also notice as you look down the side of this car that, well, it's kind of slab-sided, flat-sided. When you compare that to the 427 car, radically different. Now, the original 289, 260 cars, they were much more similar to this. But when it came time to put that big engine in, boy, they needed to stretch things out and give it a little bit wider stance, as well as the fact they wanted to give it just a little bit more bite in the rear end. You'll also notice this section coming down from the hood, the front fascia, is also a little bit larger angle right here. It's got a rake look, a little bit meaner, and of course you've got that oil inlet down there. And of course, once again, when you look back, you see the big, huge flares right there with the big, huge flares in the back. I will tell you that most of the CSX 4000 cars that were built have fiberglass bodies. This one has an aluminum body. There were a small number that were ordered within that series that have aluminum bodies, just like the semi-competition cars that were created back in those days. In fact, this does have the 427 SC, which stands for semi-competition. So you paid more if you were getting a CSX 4000 car with an aluminum body. In talking with the folks at Shelby American, one of the things they point out is you have to be very careful about talking in absolute terms with any Cobras. And that's the fact that these were all hand built. On any given day, well, they might run out of parts. They might do things slightly different. And they might have to go buy some parts that were different. And so as a result, saying that it had this or it didn't have that or it absolutely did this, you have to be very cautious. For example, there's, I think, 10 cars that have these chrome elements underneath the body and the chassis that were accidentally chromed, and rather than throw them away, they just put them on. So if somebody tells you, oh, those were never chrome parts, not true, because on a relatively random day, you never knew quite what was going to happen. I love this big FIA fuel filler right there, competition fuel filler. This has what we'll call the 427 style roll hoop. Going back to the point that they made the cars different and evolved them over time, the 289 competition cars actually had a roll hoop similar to this, but with a bar that came into the passenger compartment. This is the style that they were using in the later 427 cars. And of course, I believe they all came that way if they came with a roll hoop, but it's possible that, once again, on a random day, they might have built it slightly different. Of course, this has the massive side exhaust, and you have to be very, very careful with these. For example, if you were to look at a Corvette from this era, it would have a little element that goes over this, a heat shield. If you're stepping out of this car, and you have to remember to step over this, because this is extremely hot, and it is so hot that you could easily burn yourself, and there's no protection for you. You're stuck. I mean, if you step out and you hit that, well, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Of course, this has the spectacular wine glass Halibron wheels. See this design right here, this little element, they refer to it as the wine glass wheels. Halibron made these. They're magnesium. Remember when we used to call fancy wheels mags back in the 60s because they were built of magnesium, and that's exactly what they were doing. And I should point out that over time, the AC Ace body evolved. There were like 3 different generations. The last generation actually had a different type of engine, and they were able to lower the hood line. The earlier AC Aces actually had a higher hood, which quite frankly wouldn't have looked as attractive as when they were turning them into the Cobras. This has just a 90-inch wheelbase. Think about that, only 90 inches. But did you need any more than that? I mean, think about it. You know, it had just enough to put that big engine up front. a place for the driver to sit, a decent sized doors, and then obviously this big, huge piece of meat on the back, that big tire, and you didn't need much hanging over in, just a fuel cell on the back to keep the fuel for your racing. As I mentioned earlier, Shelby American did not deliver this car with an engine or transmission, but in talking with the people at Shelby American, they believed that when this car was delivered back in 2000, it was fitted with a 427 engine that had been stroked out to 482 cubic inches. Stroking simply means they put in a crankshaft with a longer throw, so the piston actually travels a greater distance. It pulls in more air and fuel, and it increases the compression ratio. Bottom line, well, it simply has more power. Now, since this car has only about 6 miles on the odometer, I'm going to guess that this is that original 482 cubic inch engine. The 427 that was the foundation for this engine was used in the original Cobras, and it was originally developed for NASCAR and for endurance racing. In fact, that is the same engine that powered the GT40 to its Le Mans victories in 1966 and 1967. It's part of the FE series that goes back to the 50s. The cast iron block had reinforced construction, cross-bolted main bearings, all designed to handle high speed and high stress. Early versions were known as the top oilers, but by 1965, Ford had introduced the side oiling system. It was designed to route the oil directly to the crankshaft first, so that improved reliability during the high RPM and those endurance racing conditions. In street form, it would deliver about 425 horsepower. I'm not sure where it peaked out in the competition versions. Now, as I mentioned, dropping this engine in here was not a simple affair. It required redesigning the chassis and the suspension to handle the increased weight up front. Of course, today, well, this CSX 4000 series car is specifically designed for this engine and weight. Oh yeah, it's also designed to go really fast. The Shelby Cobra may have evolved over the years, but to be honest with you, it's still not a very civilized car. I mean, this car was built for basically one thing, and that was to go racing. This is not designed to be a comfortable, gentrified car, shall we say. And the moment you get in here, you realize that. In fact, the seating position is kind of awkward because they've got this big, huge transmission tunnel right here for that massive engine up front. You're actually sitting at an angle like this, just off to the side, which is similar to something like for example, a Lamborghini Countach or some of the modern supercars that have you moved off to the side. And there is not much room for your feet down here. I have modern shoes that are a little too wide. I had to take them off so I could get my feet in here. And pushing down on the clutch, boy, that is a competition clutch. You really have to work at that. The seats themselves, well, I'm sure they're probably much nicer than the original AC Ace, but in reality, there's not a lot to them. I mean, you've got nice racing harnesses, but beyond that, there's just not an awful lot to offer in terms of creature comfort. In fact, this car is not a convertible. It's important to point out. This is a roadster. This car did not come, for example, with a folding top. Now, Shelby did make a hard top that you could attach. Not a lot of cars got that. And of course, there was the spectacular Cobra Daytona Coupe designed by Pete Brock, one of the most spectacular shapes of all time. But that was really a completely different body than what you're going to get on this car. Back inside the car, when you look at the dash, a lot more gauges than probably came on that original AC Ace. When they first started building the continuation cars, they started using the Smith gauges that they'd been using during the 1960s, but over time they realized they needed to step up their game a little bit more, and so now they have their own Shelby American gauges. And I love the speedometer right here, and the fact that the 0 on the speedometer, 0 miles an hour, is over on the right-hand side. Most of the time it's going to be on the left-hand side. So it's on the right-hand side, and it sweeps this way, so it actually looks different as it's going up. It's just a different style. It's more of a racing style. One of the other things that evolved over time was the steering rack. I think in the very beginning they were using MGB style steering racks. Over time they kind of evolved and went beyond that. But this is all about acceleration. This is all about going fast. I mean, this thing back in the 60s could do 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. Now, for a street licensed car, a car that came technically from a manufacturer, that was absolutely amazing performance for its day. I mean, yeah, now we have cars that do it in 3 seconds, but 4 seconds was pretty spectacular. And there's this great story that goes back to a legend, if you want to call it that. The Carroll Shelby with the 427s would put a $100 bill up here on the dashboard. And he'd tell whoever was in the car that, if they could grab that while he was accelerating, they could have it. And as the legend goes, no one supposedly ever got that. I sometimes think, however, that was just a Carroll Shelby story. I'm not sure that it actually had much validity to it. This, of course, does have Carroll Shelby signing right there. Carroll Shelby, for a fee, would sign just about anything, and the money all went to his foundation, which was a great way that people could get a touch of Carroll Shelby, and they could raise some money for the foundation at the same time. Now, I will say that if this was a true street car from the 60s, this would have had a glove compartment right here. It also would have had a, let's call it a map case or a pocket over on the side. And because this is a semi-competition car, no map case, no glove compartment right there. Once again, this was all about pure, brutal acceleration. I won't even say it's really comfortable. It's comfortable enough, but this is all about going fast, not in a straight line, going fast in a straight line, and then turning right and left. And if I reach out right here, boy, I can touch that rear tire because we're so close to it. So this Cobra is really the ultimate street machine that's really a race car that you can actually take down to the grocery store if you want. Shelby built fewer than 350 427 Cobras back in the 60s, which explains why the CSX 4000 series of cars found a hungry set of consumers. More than 900 of these were built. Other models were built as well. For example, the 7000 series is a continuation of the 1964 289 powered FIA Roadster. The 6000 series is the next generation of 427 cars. And the 8000 series cars are those original flat-sided 289s. And they've had a variety of other cars they built as well. But this legendary automobile comes down to really two things: Carroll Shelby's visionary concept and that original AC Ace with a chassis by John Tajaro and this iconic shape created by Eric George Gray. This design truly stood the test of time to become an automotive legend.